U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 25% tariff on all car and light truck imports, saying it would drive growth. But soon came bad news for German automakers, with giants like Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz seeing their first quarter 2025 net profits plunge over 40%. Now, the focus is on your money tonight. Volkswagen announced it will impose an import fee on its vehicles impacted by the 25% tariff. These are challenging times as we navigate uncharted waters for global trade. In early 2025, Trump introduced a 25% tariff on German cars entering the United States, shaking global supply chains. Audi and Volkswagen responded sharply, halting shipments after April 2nd due to rising costs. The tariff sparked turmoil, causing import prices to soar and forcing automakers to rethink strategies. Volkswagen felt the sting immediately, with profits falling 37% in the first quarter, from 4.6 billion euros to 2.8 billion. This decision now casts a long shadow over future U.S.-Europe trade relations. When Trump announced the 25% tariff, German automakers acted quickly and quietly. Audi and Volkswagen stopped shipments of popular models like the Q5 and A6, leaving over 37,000 vehicles stalled at ports from Mexico to the Gulf Coast. The silence was strategic, a way to calm consumers, investors, and dealers. Yet this was no sign of rebellion, just a measured attempt to shield profits amid rising uncertainty. The possibility of a 50% tariff only added to the risk, making it a high-stakes gamble to send cars to U.S. ports. The halt in shipments triggered one of the sharpest drops in German car exports to the United States in years. Ports like Baltimore and Houston went quiet, and dealership lots began to thin. Service departments struggled with parts shortages, relying on older models for repairs. What might have appeared as a small disruption quickly became a significant shift, showing how quickly politics can affect commerce. Data revealed that the 37,000 stalled vehicles amounted to nearly 2 months of U.S. inventory. Rather than abandoning the market, the automakers delayed shipments, hoping negotiations between Washington and Brussels would clarify trade rules. Yet as weeks passed, the economic toll became harder to ignore. Dealers felt the strain first. In the Midwest, Audi showrooms missed deliveries, and Volkswagen outlets in Texas ran low on popular models, prompting wary customers to hesitate. Although intended as a temporary fix, the shipment freeze exposed the fragility of the car industry. Sending cars to the U.S. was no longer a sure bet. The strength of the decision lay in its quiet nature, a calculated move, not a bold stand. Audi and Volkswagen acted to survive in an unpredictable environment. The halt reflected a deep shift as politics began to dominate over market forces. For workers at ports and shipping centers, the shift came quickly. Hours were cut, tasks reduced, and spaces left empty. Logistics firms accustomed to a steady flow of European cars faced delays and storage bottlenecks. Meanwhile, automakers raced to adjust, seeking ways to limit losses and postpone tax payments. By May 2025, what started as a reaction to a tariff evolved into a long-term sign that car makers must now adapt to a world where politics often shape the market more than supply and demand. Holding back 37,000 cars was no mistake. It was a statement. It signaled that German automakers are accepting a new reality, where the U.S. market is no longer guaranteed. Halting shipments is more than just a tactic. It has become a necessity. As this freeze stretches on, the bigger question is when it will end, and what this means for global trade in the years to come. Meanwhile, 37,000 cars remain grounded, a clear sign of uncertainty in a shifting world. The silence from Audi and Volkswagen may be calculated, but its impact is resounding. The rules have changed, and the auto industry must adapt or risk falling behind. Building in America, the high cost of avoiding tariffs. The auto industry has faced a new reality ever since tariffs started disrupting the flow of German-made cars into the United States. Major automakers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz have been forced to rethink their production strategies. Instead of relying solely on factories in Europe and shipping cars across the Atlantic, these companies are now looking closer to the US and Mexico. This shift is not about gaining new market share. It's about survival. The U.S. government has set a 25% tariff on cars imported from Germany, with threats to raise it to 50%. This has pushed automakers to find ways to continue selling in one of the biggest car markets in the world, without bleeding money. Volkswagen has taken bold steps. The company is planning to build a new factory in the United States, an investment worth billions in years of effort. According to industry experts, this is not about growing the brand, it's about securing its future. By producing cars in the US, Volkswagen can sidestep import taxes and satisfy American leaders. It can also stay competitive if trade rules get even stricter. Meanwhile, BMW has taken a different approach. The company already operates a large plant in Spartanburg, South Carolina, making SUVs for global markets. Now BMW is adding more shifts and ramping up production to reduce its reliance on German imports. But the Spartanburg site has limits. Even with longer shifts, it can't match the output of BMW's factories in Europe. This leaves the company exposed while it adjusts to these new demands. Mercedes-Benz is focusing on long-term changes. The automaker plans to build its GLC SUV in Alabama by 2027. It already operates a factory in Tuscaloosa that produces other models. Adding the GLC to its lineup will reduce its dependence on imports from Europe. Yet this plan has a major weakness. 2027 is still a long way off. Until then, Mercedes must navigate rising tariffs and deal with the growing pressure and risk posed by delays. This shift to North America marks a huge turning point for German car manufacturers. For decades, the system worked smoothly. Cars were built in places like Wolfsburg and Munich, then shipped across oceans to buyers around the world. That system relied on stable trade agreements and open borders. Those conditions have changed. Today, automakers must rethink where and how they build their vehicles. This isn't just about moving factories. It's about adapting to a world where politics can reshape global commerce overnight. The cost of making this shift is enormous. Setting up new plants or expanding existing ones takes huge investments of time and money. Companies must buy land, secure permits, hire workers, and build new facilities. All of this can take years. Volkswagen's planned US factory, for example, will cost billions long before the first car rolls off the line. BMW and Mercedes-Benz face the same challenge as they upgrade their plants. Meanwhile, every company must adapt to US regulations and contend with local issues like taxes and unions. This makes the process slow, complex, and costly. There are other hurdles too. New workers in the US and Mexico must be trained to build cars with German precision, which adds time and expense. Companies must also navigate different safety and environmental rules, which often resemble Europe's tough standards. Currency fluctuations complicate matters even further. If the dollar weakens, profits can drop sharply. All of this makes it harder for automakers to move quickly while still maintaining strength in other global markets. The urgency to adapt grows every day. Tariffs are already cutting into profits, and BMW has stated it could lose as much as €1 billion if trade tensions continue. Volkswagen is worried about the same issue. That's why it's working hard to launch its US production plans. The goal is clear: to be ready if tariffs rise again. By manufacturing cars in North America, they can skip added fees and keep prices fair for buyers. Mexico is another option these companies are exploring. Its trade agreements with the US allow goods to move across the border tariff-free. German automakers already have factories there, producing cars for both the US and other markets. As tariffs impact European imports, Mexico appears to be a smart choice that could save money. But it's not risk-free. The US government might disapprove of this shift. Leaders in Washington could pressure these firms or adjust the rules. That makes Mexico a challenging option, even if it looks promising. Each path has its pros and cons. Building in the US might win favor with American leaders, but it comes with higher costs. Making cars in Mexico is cheaper, but it could spark political tension. Staying in Germany guarantees quality, yet the tariffs are too steep. No option is simple. Still, doing nothing would be the biggest mistake. These companies understand they can't just wait and hope things get better. As 2025 approaches, the car industry is evolving quickly. German automakers aren't just addressing today's hurdles, they're planning for the future. The old ways of making and selling cars are disappearing. Trade is no longer straightforward, and politics now play a bigger role than ever. This shift towards the US and Mexico shows how serious the situation has become and how the global car market might look very different in the years ahead. A fragile pause. Why German car makers remain cautious. Financial markets briefly surged with optimism after President Trump delayed the next round of tariffs on European goods. German automaker stocks rose slightly, suggesting some relief. Yet deep down, the industry's biggest names remained wary. Volkswagen and Audi didn't rush to resume shipments. Instead, they kept their cars in limbo, waiting for stronger signs of stability. The decision to halt shipments came from deep concerns about political volatility. The tariff delay felt more like a fragile truce than a guarantee of peace. Automakers knew that trade policies could shift with little warning, so they chose to safeguard their investments rather than risk being exposed to sudden changes. The delay came after a phone call between President Trump and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Though the conversation bought some time, it didn't lead to a concrete agreement. Both sides remained divided on key issues like market access and regulatory standards. Automakers recognized this for what it was, a tactical move, not a true step towards resolution. Once bustling with arrivals of luxury vehicles, American ports grew quieter. In Baltimore, the flow of German cars slowed to a trickle. Houston and Charleston experienced the same. Dock workers accustomed to long shifts now had fewer hours and lighter workloads. The slowdown was more than a logistical setback. It was a sign of deeper tensions. Shipping firms faced a challenging situation. Containers meant for the U.S. were diverted to Mexico or Asia, waiting for instructions. The cost of storage and rerouting surged, adding millions to expenses. Meanwhile, customs brokers began advising clients to offshore high-value imports, a tactic usually reserved for luxury goods, not mass-produced cars. Dealerships across the U.S. felt the strain. With fewer arrivals, showrooms had limited inventory. Popular models like the Audi S6 and Volkswagen Tiguan became harder to find. Customers faced long waits or had to settle for alternatives. Sales staff missed their targets and watched their commissions shrink. The shortage wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a threat to their livelihood. In major cities like Chicago and Miami, dealerships reported a 50% drop in new car deliveries. Some turned to leasing older models or offering discounts on less popular trims. Others tried to source cars from Canada, an expensive and complicated workaround. Meanwhile, customs data told a grim story. German auto imports to the U.S. fell by 23% compared to the previous year. This drop was not due to lack of demand. It was a direct result of corporate caution. Automakers were unwilling to send cars into a market where trade rules could shift overnight. They chose to wait, even if it meant sacrificing short-term sales. The disruption extended far beyond the showroom floor. Over 75,000 vehicles from European brands were left in limbo. Some were rerouted to Canada and kept in bonded warehouses to postpone customs payments. Shipping firms reported a rise in requests to divert containers to smaller, less visible ports. This tactic, often used in trade disputes, allowed automakers to sidestep penalties while they waited for clarity. Service departments felt the pressure too. Fewer new cars meant a shortage of replacement parts. Mechanics in Texas found themselves running out of vital components. Some dealerships resorted to stripping parts from unsold inventory to cover urgent repair requests. The supply chain, once seamless, became a patchwork of temporary measures. In Germany, factories started to scale down. BMW cut summer shifts in Bavaria to match weakened Atlantic demand. Volkswagen offered early retirements in Zwickau to reduce staff costs while avoiding layoffs. Mercedes-Benz canceled a major hiring event in Stuttgart, signaling a pause in new positions. These moves weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a larger trend. Production is now shaped more by political risk than consumer demand. Managers review forecasts with utmost caution. Hiring freezes have become routine. New model rollouts are delayed. Analysts call this a silent contraction, not a wave of closures, but a gradual withdrawal from earlier ambitions. Volkswagen announced a 10% production cut for the second quarter of 2025. The move was framed as temporary, but internal meetings hinted it could be extended if trade tensions continue. Other manufacturers are expected to adopt a similar approach. The impact of these cutbacks goes beyond factory gates. Suppliers, logistics firms, and local communities reliant on auto-related revenues are bracing for reduced activity. This shift is challenging to reverse because it's not about one policy or politician anymore. It's about a new understanding of risk across the global auto sector. Exporting to the U.S., once a dependable income stream, now means navigating uncertainty. German automakers must build resilience into every aspect of their operations. The tariff delay offered a moment of respite, but it didn't erase the deeper risk. It's merely a temporary reprieve in a long-running conflict. The delay brought brief relief, but the underlying threat remained. Automakers aren't just responding to today's news, they're preparing for a world where trade policies can shift in an instant. The shipment freezes, production cutbacks, and supply chain struggles point to an industry in transition. The path ahead is unclear, but one thing is certain: the old ways of doing business are gone. The auto sector's challenges serve as a warning for other industries, too. Should tariffs linger, electronics, machinery, and others could soon grapple with the same hurdles. Today, the focus is on cars, but tomorrow the ripple effects may spread further, reshaping jobs and growth across the Atlantic. The German auto industry now operates in a new era, where strategic adaptation, not resistance, defines its path forward. Engineering prowess alone can no longer guarantee its dominance. Today, political forces hold the reins, guiding the future of this industrial powerhouse. This is not merely a protest against unfavorable conditions, but a calculated shift aimed at survival and long-term relevance. In a world where trade tensions set the rules, especially between the US and the EU, German car makers have come to realize that politics, not technology, is now the primary force reshaping their industry, prompting bold and practical adjustments. Evidence of this shift is already clear in the moves of industry leaders. BMW, for example, has increased production at its South Carolina plant, a signal of its intentional shift towards the U.S. market. Meanwhile, Audi is exploring the possibility of setting up a plant in Mexico, a strategic move to diversify its manufacturing base. These adjustments go beyond production sites. German firms are also recalibrating pricing strategies and reshaping supply chains to mitigate the effects of tariffs and political uncertainty. These measures reflect a deeper understanding that to thrive, the industry must align itself with the realities of an increasingly charged political environment. Looking ahead, the stakes could not be higher as the critical deadline for US-EU negotiations arrives on July 9, 2025. These talks will determine whether a tariff reduction agreement can avert an all-out trade war, a scenario made even more unpredictable by the shifting nature of Trump's trade policies. The outcome will profoundly shape the German auto sector's next steps. Even if a favorable agreement emerges, the industry's path has already changed. Despite being resource-intensive and time-consuming, ongoing investments in US-based operations point to a long-term strategy for reducing reliance on European exports. This is a proactive stance, one that prepares the industry for a future where geopolitical volatility is a constant. Ultimately, the resilience of the German car industry will define its legacy. The strategic changes now underway are not temporary fixes, but foundational shifts that will enable it to weather current challenges and anticipate those yet to come. As the world awaits the results of these pivotal negotiations, one fact shines through. Adaptability is not just an option, but the key to survival in this new era.